Alrighty guys, so we're back, and this is chapter 5 of the painting and texturing workflow intro tutorial. In the last chapter we discussed importing a few of the DAZ textures in, and you may or may not have went through and imported the rest onto your model. What we're going to do in the next chapter after this is we're actually going to paint detail with spotlight. So we're going to actually go ahead and just completely get rid of this texture and start from scratch, and go over the workflow and how we would paint in our own textures and really customize our model out. So I'm not going to worry about actually adding the rest of the DAZ textures, but bear in mind that is a extremely fast to market workflow. If you got a producer or somebody breathing down your back, or if you just need a model done really fast, but you need to add just a little bit of extra detail to really set that model apart from a basic DAZ figure, certainly come in here and do that. You can come in here with, say, our dots, and come in here with our Z sub, or Z add mode rather, and turn off RGB, and you can come in real quick and you can add in, detail. Maybe she's going to be an alien creature of some sort. So I mean, you can add in direct detail right here on your mesh, and with 15 million polygons, I mean, we're getting really fine detail here. As you'll see in the next chapter, we can use spotlight to add even more fine detail, actual real skin detail from a real skin texture and things like that. But we'll Control Z a couple of times to get rid of all this extra detail that we don't need. And okay, we're good. All right, but that's not what this chapter is about. We're going to discuss UV Master. And what UV Master allows us to do is allows us to create a beautiful UV map with very little struggle here in Zbrush. It creates a UV map that is perfectly flat. It's one UV tile. It's perfectly clean, and it doesn't have any of the overlaps that we get in Bodypaint. Bodypaint certainly gives us more power over our actual seams and things like that. But as you'll see with UV Master, we also get a heck of a lot of power over our seams too. For instance, we can enable control painting here. What UV Master requires, first of all, is that our model not be subdivided. It needs to have no subdivision levels. So we need to be working with the base model, or we need to be working with a clone of this model. So we can work on a clone. And it's just going to go through and create a clone for us. And what we actually probably wanted to do is actually probably create a clone at the lowest subdivision level. Because right now, ZBrush is going to take a minute to actually create a 15 million polygon clone. No, it's just taking forever to create a low subdivided clone, which is kind of interesting. I didn't think it would take that long to do that. But either way, this is our original DAZ mesh with its 14,000 vertex points. All right, so in UV Master, if we were to unwrap the model as it stands right now, and we were to go into flatten mode, we can see immediately that UV Master creates a single UV tile that looks pretty exceptional.
if we were to view this in Photoshop and we were to start to try to paint on it, and or if we were to view this in Bodypaint's 2D view and we were to paint on this, the fact of the matter is we can really tell visually quite nicely exactly what we're painting on. We can see where our nails are, we can see where the torso regions are, we can see where the head is, and we have a really fine idea of what we're doing, what we're painting, and it just gives us that control, that 2D control that we might need to be able to bring in a texture and paint in a flat projection. This is great. Previously, if you're used to using Zbrush, you could also create a UV map here using your UV mapping tools. You could set your UV map size, 4K, 2K, 1K, whatever you wanted. You come in here and you can actually use Zbrush's tiling methods. Now, what's great about these is it'll create a UV map that basically each polygon in the model will basically be mapped so that every single usable tile space on the UV map is used. So I mean, all the pixels of the UV map are going to be used, and you don't waste any space. There's none of this white space that's just being wasted pixels. However, that UV map can't be edited in Photoshop. You simply won't be able to tell where specific elements are. It's just going to be a nightmare. So you would have to edit a map like that in a 3D program that allows you to paint, like Zbrush or Bodypaint. You wouldn't have the benefit of being able to go into a 2D view and like add some minor details. So anyway, even though this map is great, and it'll work out quite nicely when we take it back into Bodypaint and try to break it up into multiple islands, we can get better than this right here in Zbrush without too much struggle. We go ahead and unflatten, bring back our 3D model, and we go into the plugin now, and we use polygroups to go ahead and create separate islands based on our polygroups. We can get a UV map that we're more accustomed to seeing from our more powerful 3D programs like Bodypaint or Maya or 3ds Max. So if we go ahead and unwrap now, and then we go ahead and flatten, we'll see that we've got a map that looks quite similar to, say, our DAZ map. We've got our character busted out into multiple UV islands. Here's the UV island for the torso. This is probably a UV island for one of the legs. There's probably another UV island for the other leg somewhere here. This is the bottom part of the torso, so forth and so on. So this is a really good UV map. We may want to, say, go into Bodypaint and probably do our head map ourselves, because UV Master doesn't, since the polygroups for the face are kind of broken up into multiple polygroups the way they are, it's kind of separated our head into 3 separate UV islands, which is not conducive to Photoshop painting or to body paint painting. We're going to basically have a UV map that's kind of split up. It doesn't really quite look the way we want it to look. So Bodypaint does a really good job on, say, the face, without us actually having to really do too much in the way of making sure the seams look right. So we might take this back into Bodypaint as is, and then kind of just fix whichever maps we don't like. I like the way this is. The only thing I don't like is the head, so it's probably all I'll do in regards to going back into Bodypaint. So with this UV map layout, what we can do now, since it's a lot cleaner and since we can kind of see what's going on with it, we can go ahead and take this into Bodypaint And we can use this to basically lay out our multiple UV tiles. So in order to do that, all we need to do is just export the model out. This naming scheme will be just fine. And we'll go into our OBJ folder where we put our OBJs. And we'll go ahead and save that out. All right. So back here in Cinema 4D, we can go ahead and close this Untitled project. We don't need it anymore for, at least not temporarily right now. We've got our main project here, but we can go ahead and go into our folder for Testa here, and we can actually just drag this OBJ that that Zbrush generated for us. We just go ahead and just drag that directly into our viewport here. We'll go ahead and leave the scale alone, and we'll go ahead and let that come in. Now, I messed up. OBJ export sucks in Cinema 4D, and OBJ import also sucks in Cinema 4D. It's going to basically import the model as separate groups instead of importing it as one whole model. Also bear in mind, I also messed up out of Zbrush because I have the model flattened instead of unflattened. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to export it. We're going to export again, and we're going to overwrite that map. We're going to go back into Cinema 4D. We're going to go ahead and close this one. So no, I don't want to save my changes. And we'll go ahead and drag in the new flat map, like so. No, we won't. We're going to go ahead and cancel. What we want to do is create a new document. We want to go into our plugins. We want to use Riptide to import. And this time we'll import from Zbrush. And we'll keep everything at the default. And then we'll go in and find the OBJ that we want to import in. In this particular case, yeah, it's not going to be the flattened version. In fact, we can go ahead and delete that right now to kind of get it out of our way, and delete its associated material as well. And we'll just keep the regular OBJ. So if we import that in, you'll see immediately that Riptide basically imports the model in with a default material. Later in this workflow, we'll go into how we can import in the materials that we get out of Zbrush and how we can recreate our materials here in Cinema 4D. It's going to be a really interesting one. But right now, we can go ahead and unlock our attributes panel so we can see our material. And we can go ahead and clear out our channel here so we get basically a regular everyday matte on our character. We don't really need the materials on this character, so we're fine. Riptide also imports a character with a whole bunch of layers. We got Fong tag layers, we got group tag layers. So these are all the groups that we initially exported out from Cinema 4D. They've all been re-imported. They've automatically been added to the group. In fact, if we double click on the group tag, we can see what groups we have applied right here. Unfortunately, Riptide doesn't actually rename the groups to their correct naming conventions, so we would have to do that manually, or because this is the exact same model that we exported, we can actually drag our selection tags from our old model onto this model, and they'll work just fine. We won't have any of those workflow issues that we had with Nitrobait. That's great. It also creates two new groups, a default material group and a default region group, that you could easily just go ahead and delete if you wanted to. They aren't added to any layers, so they're very easy to recognize here. All these materials are group tag materials, and they have all been added to the group tag layer, which bears in mind also, you can actually drag selection tags, or for that matter, any tags in Cinema 4D can also be dragged into layers, and they can be hidden using these layer controls as well. So you have a lot of control in what you can hide in these layers. It's a very powerful layer manager. If we go into Bodypaint and we show our UV mesh, we can see that Zbrush's UVs came in just fine here into Cinema 4D. We can load up the default material for painting. I like to switch back to model mode so I can actually see this in my regular model mode. But yeah, we've basically got all of our UVs available to us. And now we can actually come into Bodypaint and use some of Bodypaint's more powerful tools to go ahead and move UVs around and basically create the islands that we want, or the tiles that we want, to actually separate our materials out. So to do that, what we can do is we can basically use our selection tags, and we can basically double click here and find out which selections we want. So in this particular case, I want the nostrils, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm actually gonna name these, although in a real workflow I would definitely copy selection tags from the previous one, so I wouldn't have to actually waste my time doing this. But this is gonna be back head. I'm not even gonna really spend any major time trying to get these selection tags quite right to naming conventions and all that. All I really want to do is get an idea of which ones are the face, since those were the offending ones. Those are the ones I kind of sort of didn't like. So I think I got most of them here. Didn't get the lips, and I guess the eye sockets, I'll keep those as well. So so we'll select the polygons from the eye. We'll do this again. Select the polygons from the eye. And from the lips. And from the nostrils. And from the back of the head. And from the face. And that's pretty much the whole entire head region. And I want the seam for the head. And what you want to do is you want to hide seams. We're using a projection painting workflow in this tutorial, so technically the seams will be pretty much hidden because of the fact that we can paint through the seams here in Bodypaint or in Zbrush via the workflow. It's just a natural fact of life. Thanks to the fact that we can paint in 3 dimensions, we can paint over seams with no issues. So seams really aren't as atrocious as they would be in other workflows. However, as a general rule of thumb, most 3D tutorials will tell you, and I'll tell you the exact same thing, you probably want to try to put your seams in a place where they're going to be hidden away from sight. In this particular case, we're going to eventually put hair on this character in a future tutorial. So the back of the head would be a really good spot to go ahead and create that seam. So I know visually these particular 6 polygons here are going to define the beginning of my seam. So just putting that in the memory, I know I kind of want to start here and kind of go up. And I basically want to define a seam up the head that's going to be where my relax function here in Bodypaint, as I showed you in chapter 2, is going to basically cut my head in half at and unwrap it at. So we'll go ahead and get rid of the rest of these edges that we don't need. And once again, we're in edge mode doing this. Regular everyday Cinema 4D edge mode. Nothing special here. Just selecting a nice little edge that we want to be our seam. Because the relax function here in Bodypaint uses this edge selection as a method to cut the head out. All right. So with that edge selected, now if we go into our texture mode here, our UV polygons mode, we can see all the polygons that make up the head here in our UV map. And as we can see, they're all separated into separate islands, and that's because the polygroups that defined, or in this case the selection tags that define this area, were all basically used by UV Master to split the head into these 4 or 5 UV islands, which is what we didn't want to happen. Alright, so in Bodypaint we can just easily correct this. We can come in to our UV mapping. We can go ahead and put our face into a frontal view here, and we can either use our frontal projection or our flat projection. I'm going to go ahead and use frontal. Now we got this nice frontal projection of the head, and then we can go into our relax UVs, and we can relax and make sure it cuts the selected edges. So what's going to happen is that particular edge that we selected, it's going to cut right there and flatten the map out so that the seam is where that edge is. So let's go ahead and apply. And there we go. Now we have a nice map that defines our face. And this map is better than our Zbrush map, because it's going to give us we can actually see where the face is now. We can see where the back of the head is. We can see this cut that we made, that edge selection that we made right here defines our seam. We can in Photoshop we can paint on this now, and we can actually, you know, get a better idea of what we're doing. All right, so we want a lot of detail on the face, so if we hit T to go ahead and switch to our scale tool, we want to expand the face way out, and we kind of want to probably go into our rotate tool, which would be R, and we kind of want to rotate the face that way, and we want to scale it up some more. And we kind of want our face to kind of be, you know, we kind of want it to dominate its own tile. All right. Now, the face is pretty much taking up a good amount of space, but we may want to put something else on this tile. So maybe we want to have our neck texture be here. Or maybe we want some really fine detail on the lips, so maybe we just want to make a selection of just the lips and, you know, define those as their own polygroup and kind of, you know, or define them as their own UV island and kind of put them separate. So let's go ahead and try to do that. Let's go ahead and select the lips out. We can go ahead and move to our live selector tool, deselect all the polygons. Click on the lips, select just the lips. Then we can go ahead and in edge mode, we can go ahead and deselect all the edges as well, so that we don't have to worry about there being an accidental sort of weird relax. And then in our projection mode, we can just do a flat projection, flatly project the lips out, and then we can relax them to make them look a little bit better. So that's perfect for Photoshop. We can tell exactly, you know, what our lips look like. This is great. And we can go ahead and scale those in. And, you know, this way we can, you know, quickly start to create a texture map that kind of gives us, you know, a good distribution of pixel area for different areas of our body. You know, where all those lips were kind of small here, so, you know, same thing. Maybe you want to split the ears up so they get a lot more detail. You could do that. You could create a new polygon selection specifically for the ears, and you know, define those separately. But the great thing here, the great thing to take away here is that UV Master basically gives you a really good jump off point here. If we go ahead and select the eyes again, get the lips already selected, select the nostrils, select the back of the head, and select the face. Now we've got the whole face selected again. We can go ahead and use our transform tools to move this one space over, and there we basically now have one UV tile dedicated strictly to the face. We have another UV tile dedicated strictly to the rest of the body. And that's basically where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to have a texture map dedicated strictly to the face, and another one dedicated strictly to the rest of the body. And that way the face gets a lot of detail, gets its own 4K map with plenty of detail dedicated strictly to it. So we can do lots of freckles and lots of expressive pores and wrinkles and things on the face. We can paint like a lot of detail into our 4K map strictly for the face. And then we can use the rest of our 4K detail to paint some nice detail into the body. And we're not really wasting too much detail. Since the eyes, the jaw, the tongue, and the eyes are separate objects, they'll each have their own texture map as well. We could get kind of funny, and we could actually kind of sort of put those texture maps together, and then use the interesting workflow here in Cinema 4D that will allow us to actually use the same texture for you know, different objects, but that could get confusing. So we're gonna kind of sort of just you know, have those particular objects have their own texture maps, which is great. They each get their own 4K texture maps, which is awesome. Though that might also eat a lot of memory, so maybe they don't even need a 4K map. Maybe you just give them 1K maps, you know. So you can have different maps, different map sizes for different particular objects. Maybe the face doesn't need 4K. Maybe it only needs 2K. Maybe the body needs 4K because there's a lot more polygons here. You know, so this will be 4K map. This will be a 2K map, and then the eyes, the teeth, and all those separate objects, maybe they'll just be 1K maps. So you can maximize your memory in case you're designing, well, depending upon what you're designing, you know. Are you doing this for film? Are you doing this for games? It all depends. But once we have this map created, we can actually take this model back into Zbrush and use its new UV map as our basis for the UV map for our model. The great thing is also, this is a great workflow for reconstructing your UVs. Let's say you don't like your dad's UVs, or let's say you want to have your own UVs. Well, you can do this multi-tile workflow here in Bodypaint. Use UV Master to create a UV layout that is more your speed, more your stilo. you've already got Polypaint applied to your model in Zbrush. So what we can do is we can come to our plugins, come to Riptide. Let's go back into a Cinema 4D layout just to make sure everything looks okay. Okay, yeah, this looks great. All right, so we can come to our come back out to our modeling mode, come to our plugins, come to Riptide, do an OBJ export. Go ahead and make sure it's on ZBrush, make sure it's file per mesh, make sure everything looks good there. Export the OBJ. Over here in our Windows Explorer, let's go ahead and just make sure we just delete the old stuff, you know, just to make sure that there's no trouble, because we don't want any trouble. And click OK. And it's created a new OBJ file for us. Great. We can come back to ZBrush, and in our subtool panel, if we switch to our tester model, which already has the texture and everything applied to it, if we go ahead and switch to, say, her lowest subdivision level, and you can see how you lose so much detail, so much Polypaint detail when you switch to a lower subdivision. So like I was saying, if you don't have it at a very high subdivision level when you initially apply a Polypaint, you're going to lose a lot of texture detail. So this is what it will look like if you didn't subdivide. But with this tool selected and with it at its lowest subdivision level, we can go ahead and import in our new model that has the new UVs. So, and if we import in that model now, the beauty of this is it kind of sort of, since it was the same exact model, same exact point count, same exact everything, it inherited all the sculpting detail that we had. But the high sculpted detailed model also inherited our UV map. So now we can go back up to subdivision level 6. And let it think. Okay, so we've got all our sculpted detail. We've got all this high resolution detail that we got going on. In our texture map, if we were to create a new map from our UV map, we can also see that yeah, our new UV map is applied. You know, so based on our UV map, we can see, you know, where our different textures are going to go, where they're going to be applied, and what they're going to look like. So we can see it split up the legs like so. The seam goes here on the legs. We got a seam here, and it comes down here. We scale out, perhaps frame the model. Just clicking the frame button here. You can see, we can see where all our seams are. And we can see now that the model is using our new UV scheme. Okay. We can also kind of see, based on the UV map here, we can kind of see how it's also overlapping our UVs. You can see that the face in the lower area of this texture here, you can see how it's kind of overlapping the rest of the body, and everything is just kind of over top of everything. And that's because, like I said, ZBrush doesn't understand multi-tiles. In order to get multi-tiles in here, you have to follow that workflow that I showed you a few chapters ago. You have to basically hide your poly groups, and you kind of have to just bring in textures that way. But the great thing about this workflow, of course, is the multi-map exporter does understand multiple tiles, and it will create tiles for you. It'll create tiles for the face based on your poly paint. That'll be on that UV that new UV tile that you define. So the face and the lips will have their own texture map and normal map and displacement map, and the body will have its own texture, normal, and displacement maps as well. So this is great. All right. So that's your alternative workflow. If you're trying to create a clean texture map, or if you're trying to convert one texture mapping to another texture mapping, this is a beautiful way to do it, because you can bring in your texture maps, you can apply it to your characters. You can change the UVs in an external program or here in Zbrush, and then you can apply the new UV mapped model to the sculpted model here in Zbrush. And then when you use the multi-map exporter, now you've got a new UV layout that used all that Polypaint data. So Polypaint basically acts as a buffer that allows you to transfer data between different disparate UV maps or different mapped characters. So it's pretty amazing. All right. So in the next tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to take our clean character here, and what we're going to actually do is I'm going to show you guys one more thing. If we go into RGB mode right now, and we go to our color, we have already got a white color. So if we just go to color here, and we go ahead and fill the object with this white color, it filled the object with the white color here in the RGB channel, or in the Polypaint channel, rather than filling it all the way up with the in the material. So we still get to keep our base kind of sort of skin material, but now we've just basically we paint bucketed the character with white. So this gives us a great stepping point for our next tutorial, where we're going to actually paint new textures onto this model. So I will see you guys there.